I'm not changing the name of the JP poll, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I don't feel like it, and I like the way it sounds. And we put out an explainer, Colin and Jesse, we put out an explainer that we recorded in the preseason every week when we put that thing out on social. So to those of you who are flooding my inbox trying to do the right thing, I will give you credit. You're searching to be a peacemaker, and you're saying, why don't you just change the name of the poll so it's not so confusing? Why don't they look at the explainer? Also, it's not the end of the world if someone doesn't understand a poll on Twitter. So we're jam-packed. We're high atop a sunny downtown Nashville, Tennessee. A little bit earlier start than normal. We cleared it with Academy Sports and Outdoors. They're fine with it. They're good with it. They present the show free of charge on this Thursday, October 3rd, the year of our Lord 2024. I feel like we've done all we can to warn America about potential upsets that are brewing all across the fruited plain. However, I will make one more last-ditch effort to raise awareness on tonight's show, or this afternoon's show, sort of an afternoon drive special here. I also, since there are no rules in college football, am just going to change a bunch of my predictions from the preseason. So we're going to re-predict the conference title picture. We're going to re-predict the playoff picture. And I've got actually a very controversial Final Four, not the teams themselves, maybe one is, but also because of the way the pairings would work and the locations of the games, I think I have uncovered a scandal that's just waiting to happen. You'll see what I mean. We're going to talk about Kirby Smart because Urban Meyer talked about Kirby Smart, and I think he said something that was pretty spot on. And so I'm going to delve into that just a little bit. Cole Cubelic's going to stop by early enough in the afternoon where he's on his way up here. We're leaving Nashville in like an hour or two, and he's coming to Nashville in like ships passing in the night. We will miss him. But they're watching us in Sugar Land, Texas, Alpena, Michigan, Cornelius, North Carolina, Reno, Nevada. Thank you guys so much. I got a loaded Friday tomorrow. I'm doing some stuff with TexAgs out there in the morning. I mean, we'll be in College Station later tonight, actually. I'm doing stuff with TexAgs in the morning. I am going to go and do some other stuff that I can't talk about publicly. I'm going to speak. It's closed to the public, but for the second week in a row, we are speaking to the fine students this time at Texas A&M tomorrow, and some other odds and ends. Not to mention Friday Night Lions tomorrow night. All that to say, make sure you're following on the socials, at Late Kick Josh over on Instagram especially, because that's where you see a lot of the footage that we will gather. All right, I'm going to do upset alerts first, and then I'm just going to re-predict the entire thing in a second, and it's actually a jam-packed show for a Thursday. Happy you're with us. Okay, upset alerts for Week 6. We like to put the upset alert meter. We like to give a 1 to 10 rating on these things. How concerned am I on these games? And I've got one for you. We didn't talk about this one the other night at all because I wanted to save it for Thursday. Clemson is at Florida State Saturday night. Clemson is favored by a little over 2 touchdowns, about a 14.5-point favorite over at FanDuel right now. Brock Glenn is getting the start. So I know it's Cocktober for those of you up in Columbia who root for South Carolina, but it is also sort of low-key Brocktober, hopefully, for the folks down in Tallahassee. Cade Klubnik, quarterback at Clemson, of course, been a little different player on the road throughout his career than he has been at home. So I've got a little concern here. It's a 7, which is a little bit higher than a 2-touchdown spread would normally indicate. I'm a little bit concerned about the potential for an upset here. I don't think Florida State is just totally dead, buried, and gone. There's going to be some little blip on the radar screen at some point this year. No, I do not count the Cal game, where they show a little more life than you, me, Meemaw, and Jesse and Colin, anyone else thinks they have. This is a total last resort moment. You're looking to restart your season if you're Florida State. All your preseason goals are out the window. You're looking to restart your season. And the impression that everyone's gotten of you is you're dead, buried, and gone, and Clemson is surging. But is Clemson surging? Maybe. They've beaten App State, they've beaten NC State, and they've beaten Stanford. Something starts to happen sometimes in college football where in your mind you start to think something, but you don't really fully evaluate why you think it. I, much like the rest of you, think Clemson is trending up heavily. But where have the tests come from? Where has the true road game come from? The answer is, That doesn't mean they're not good. That just means that there could be some things here that we're overinflating a little bit. So when I have an overinflated asset against a heavily devalued asset, then it stands to reason that we want to pay attention to this. And also, here's what's crazy. Florida State's 114th in turnover margin, so any given game, if that flips, and then you mix in the home field, because these folks still want to root for something down there, crazier things have happened. And the other thing that I just want to remind you of is every year, About this time, there are teams that you've given up on. I do it just as well. And then you come December, look back, and you say, you know, had I known that this team had some kind of second life about itself, and I would have blindly just started betting them in October, I would be a rich man. Well, no, you wouldn't. They probably wouldn't have limits where you can bet high enough, but I do still agree that those exist. And I'm going to do something that's probably braver than anything we've done on this show. I am not only going to talk about this stuff, and I'm not only going to say I'm putting a 7 on the upset alert scale here. I am betting Florida State plus 14.5 over at FanDuel. In fact, I did it right before we came on air. And I am adding them as a Ramen Noodle Express best bet. Because somehow, some way, Brock Glenn is going to find a way. Somehow, some way, Clemson is going to be just subpar enough on the road. And somehow, some way, this is going to be a fight in the fourth quarter to where we can profit off of it. Florida State plus 14.5 is added to the Ramen Noodle Express. I'm not picking the outright upset. That's not what we're doing here. I'm just saying I'm watching it closer than I think the average college football citizen is watching it. Next up, we talked about this game Tuesday night. I'm going to revisit it. Ole Miss is at South Carolina. This is the start of Cocktober. And not only is it the start of Cocktober, South Carolina is coming off a bye. Now, we do have, this early in the season, we already have the transitive property factor in play here. What we mean by that is simply, we've got South Carolina hosting Ole Miss. Both of them have already played a common opponent. Both of them have already played Kentucky. Kentucky got blown out by South Carolina, 31-6. Kentucky just went and beat Ole Miss at home. They beat them in the Grove last week. So, does that matter? Usually not, but things are there that you can learn from. Big question around South Carolina, will Lenora Sellers play? My guess is he will. My guess is you'll see Robbie Ashford as well. My guess is kind of like my guess with the A&M game, in that even if Wegman's healthy and ready to go, we will still see Marcel Reed. We may even see him start. So I don't know exactly what the starting rotation will look like here, but I still think there's some things Robbie Ashford can do that will warrant him playing in this game. Ole Miss is a tempo, pace-based offense. They have not seen it yet at South Carolina. LSU did not do it to the degree that they will. So if they can extend some drives and also can neutralize, to a degree, South Carolina's pass rush, that's optimal. It is a total do-or-die moment for Ole Miss. And I mean that. Like, this is it. Their season is virtually done if they don't win this game. Because I don't think Ole Miss has the kind of schedule where you could bake in losses to Kentucky and South Carolina in the resume and still have them in the postseason. Now, that stands to wait and see what the rest of the field looks like. But the goals were very clear for Ole Miss. So, it sounds like I'm making a case for Ole Miss. I am. I think they're going to win the game. My concern level is a 7 here, only because they haven't been in a true road environment. And there are some difference makers on that South Carolina defense. And not to mention, Kentucky held you to 17 last week at home. So, maybe they were an overvalued asset in their own right. I'm going to put a 7 on the concern meter and just watch it. I'm not putting anything on it. Next up, this is a game that I think is off of most people's radars. It should not be because, it's a conference game and all. USC at Minnesota. Hit the rewind button. Let's just pretend it's 2006. And I just said that sentence out loud. USC at Minnesota is a conference game. Pretend it's 2016, and I say that. I'm still crazy. Well, here we are. USC, we track this sort of thing. They are the 4th most traveled FBS team in the last 4 weeks. They've been all over the place. So, Minnesota last week kind of sort of got screwed. Even the officiating had to come out and all but admit we screwed them out of a shot to win a game. And so you'd look at them a lot differently had they not. But in reality, they're no different a team. Here's the problem. This is not a great matchup for USC. I'm just telling you. Here's problem number 1. Kind of. Minnesota has the best pass defense statistically in the Big Ten. However, that's with Michigan and Iowa and North Carolina minus their quarterback baked in. So Minnesota probably does not have the best pass defense in the Big Ten. But they got a good one. They got a good enough one. Let's put it that way. That's number 1. Number 2, they are 16th in pressure rate. So they can get after the quarterback. And number 3, slow starts have been a chronic problem for USC this year. It's been the case in several weeks now. And number 4, with Bear Alexander gone, there is one USC defensive lineman that weighs over 300 pounds. Minnesota is 310 or heavier across the offensive front. So if they get their kind of quicksand game, if USC cannot sting them early, then they can quickly be drug out in the deep end where they have no interest in being. I have concern here. I've got it at an 8 on my upset alert concern meter. I am worried. Look at my hand. It's shaking a little bit. And this one's fine. This one's shaking a little bit. That's the West Coast hand there. Next up, speaking of the West Coast, it's been a lot of really interesting artwork that has been put forth in advance of this game. I've been victimized by it. The Calgorithm got to me. So we've got Miami at Cal. Good old-fashioned woke versus Coke matchup here. Miami's favored by 10.5. I've got a 6 on the upset alert scale. Had Miami taken care of business against Virginia Tech, it would probably be higher. In some ways, that was the wake-up call. You never like to see a more talented team get the wake-up call before they play you. And so we've got that factor. We got Miami's equipment truck. I was looking at them. I was tracking their journey out west. They were stopped somewhere in Texas. They had already logged 1,300 miles. They had like 1,800 more to go. It is a tough situation when you've driven 1,300 miles and you are not halfway to your destination. But this is conference football. This is ACC conference play here. It's what we all wanted. Miami was bad against Virginia Tech. They were undisciplined. They gave up yards after yards after yards to a Virginia Tech team that had struggled to move the ball. Cal's rested. Miami's got 1 day's extra rest, but they're also traveling. I just flat out think Miami's going to go out there and out-athlete Cal. That's what I think will happen. I do not have as high an upset alert concern grade here. I've got a 6 on it. And that's mainly because of the external dynamics, the travel dynamics. Because if they were playing this in like Kansas City or New Orleans or something like that, I wouldn't have it on my radar. Think Miami's going to be good here. Think they'll be okay here. But we'll see. Because I thought that about the game against Virginia Tech too. Baylor's at Iowa State. Why are we even talking about this game? Iowa State favored by 11.5. I'm going to put a solid 6.5 on the upset alert concern meter here. Baylor feels dead. I know they do. Maybe they're not. They look dead in the water. Coming off that Colorado last-second loss, they laid down against Brigham Young early, but then they got up and almost came back and won the game. I think most people had tuned out by then if you were watching it to begin with. Iowa State, #1 defense in the Big 12, but they have not faced any kind of legitimate passing threat yet. This will be the first one. Baylor's quarterback, 324 and 4 touchdowns against Brigham Young last week, mainly in a come-from-behind effort. So like watching Carson Beck against Alabama, it's kind of the same vibe it was, but it counts. And also, if we're talking about the matchup of an overinflated versus underinflated asset, you will never see people higher on Iowa State than they are right now, except for me, because I always am. And you will never see folks lower on Baylor than they are now. That's why that number's 11.5. Now it's 12.5. So I'm a little concerned. Only because as much as I love Iowa State, I salute the American flag and the Psi NATO flag every morning in that order. Are they ready to deal with prosperity? Are they ready? It's an open-ended question. They're free to answer it. I got a 6.5 on the upset alert concern scale there. And lastly, Rutgers is at Nebraska in the middle of the day Saturday. And Nebraska is laying anywhere from 6.5 to maybe 7 or 7.5. Who knows where this one closes? I am concerned. I've got an 8 on it. Now, the JP poll gives me the reason. We got Rutgers ahead of Nebraska. And so we think that this is right at an even game, may even slightly lean Rutgers an outright upset. That's what the model would think. I don't know that it's the best of matchups for Rutgers, but I think they'll be ultra competitive just because I think the team's good enough. So I'm stopping short of just sitting here outright saying, oh, give me Rutgers money line. Maybe it happens. It would make the model look good if it did. But Nebraska's got a top 15 run defense here. And I don't trust Rutgers to be able to throw the ball very effectively in this spot. So it's one of those games. Again, we've seen several of them all year. Quicksand special. Rutgers needs one. They are very adept at creating it. I'm going to put an 8 on the upset alert concern meter here. Rutgers is good enough to pull this off. Matchup-wise, I lean Nebraska. Rutgers is good enough to pull it off. You are good enough, and dare I say informed enough, to head over to Academy Sports and Outdoors, whatever your needs may be this weekend. You guys may just be headed out to the woods. You need camo. You need hunting gear. Go pick it up there. You may be headed to a tailgate. You need the grills. You need the tents. You need the canopies. You need whatever it is you need at your tailgate. Go pick it up there. Maybe your little one just needs a new pair of soccer cleats. Go pick it up there. Whatever you need just need some Big League Chew, go pick it up there. They've got you covered. They've got us covered. They've been our longtime partner. They make sure the show stays free, to which someone will come in the comment section and say, are you suggesting you're going to make us pay for this show one day? No, I'm not, because we have Academy, so we don't have to do that. We don't have to keep it behind a paywall. Thank goodness. So thank you to Academy. I am headed to Academy country tonight. You fly into Texas, you fly into LA, you see the skyline. You fly into San Diego, you see the Pacific Ocean. You fly into Houston, and you just see academies as far as the eye can see. It's great. It's a wonderful thing. Sometimes I connect through Houston just so I can take a look at it. So Academy Sports and Outdoors and academy.com if you can't get there in person. This is a very, very big moment here. It's a noteworthy moment. I just want to update my conference championship predictions because even though I made them in the preseason, there are no rules that say you can't change them on the fly. So I'm changing them on the fly, or am I? Let's take a look. So let's start in the SEC. Jesse, back in August when we did our final preseason predictions, I believe I had Texas versus Alabama in the SEC championship game. And that was the moment where we basically had to barricade the doors because Georgia was the preseason favorite to win the conference, and everyone called us crazy and a Georgia hater, dog hater, DAWG. And I said, no, it's not that. I just think they've got a little tougher path. And in a world where I don't think there's a big gap between them and number 2, 3, 4 in the SEC, that may make a difference. Well, now we're looking, and that's not crazy at all. It's not a crazy concept at all that Georgia's lost once already. Maybe they'll lose again. I think they will lose at least one more. And I don't think they'll be in Atlanta. Didn't think so in the regular season or in the preseason. I still don't think so. So I have not changed my prediction at all. Bama's the current favorite to win the SEC, followed by Texas, and then Tennessee and Georgia are tied for third. I'm same as I was in the preseason on the matchup. Give me Texas versus Bama, and I am the same as I was in the preseason on the outcome. I'd still take Texas over Alabama. I think that I have removed Ole Miss from this equation. I don't think they'll factor into the conference championship race. I don't think Missouri will factor into the conference championship race. So that's a 4-team race to me right now. Bama, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, could see any of them winning it. I think it's horns and tide, and I will still take Texas because I see no reason to come off of that yet. Next up, Big 12, America's College Football Conference. Initially, I made a mistake. Not putting Iowa State in there. No, I put them in there. That wasn't the mistake. The mistake was I believed I hooked my cart to the wrong horse, and that was Oklahoma State. And I apologize. Look, I'm having trouble even looking the camera in the eye. This is tough. Breaking news tonight, Oklahoma State's not going to be in the Big 12 championship game. Whomst is, though. So right now, the new odds are Iowa State is favored to win the thing. Kansas State's right there behind them. Utah third. Then there's a little drop-off. Arizona fourth, even though they just they just beat Utah. Colorado is in this. Brigham Young is in this. Texas Tech is in it. UCF is in it. West Virginia is in it. TCU is in it. I am of the opinion we still go 10 deep in teams that it wouldn't be insane to see win this. Some of them are going to remove themselves from the equation, obviously, but look at the drop-off. If you're listening on podcast, you get all the way down to TCU, 10th in the odds right now, and then the drop-off is huge to Cincinnati and Oklahoma State and Arizona State. So there is still about a 10-team field here that conceivably could do this. Oklahoma State was fourth in the odds to start the year. They already got 2 losses. Kansas State and Utah were the favorites. Both of them already have a loss. My Iowa State Cyclones are undefeated. So I was Oklahoma State over Iowa State. That's where I was in the preseason. I'm going to keep Iowa State there, and I'm going to replace them with Utah. I'm going to replace Oklahoma State with Utah. So as of this moment, I believe enough in the Utes. Coming off a loss, so I'm not riding any bandwagon here. I believe Kyle Whittingham's team will find a way to get themselves to the Big 12 championship game and lose to Iowa State, who I should have picked to win the thing to begin with. But I didn't want claims of homerism. I run from those claims. Iowa State, your Big 12 champ, and top 4 seed in the playoffs, as they should be. All would be right with the world at that point. Next up, ACC. Initially, we may have had it right halfway. I had Miami beating Florida State. Yes, that's why I say halfway right. In the preseason, Florida State was favored to win the conference. Clemson was second. Miami was third. That does not look the same anymore. Florida State does not exist in the odds right now. We looked just for fun today. I mean, Georgia Tech is still on the board. North Carolina, Syracuse is still on the board. Florida State's not even on the board. They have ceased to exist as far as FanDuel is concerned when it comes to the ACC championship picture. Now, this is not a two-team race. Everyone's talking about Miami-Clemson right now. Louisville and SMU are still very, very much in this. They play each other this weekend, and especially if Louisville wins that, you will have a three-team race. And Louisville does play both Miami and Clemson at some point this year. So I do think it eventually becomes a three-team race. I do think Louisville will take care of business this weekend, but remains to be seen on that. I had Miami over Florida State. I will take now Miami versus Clemson in the conference title game. I'll stick with my champ. I'll still take Miami over Clemson. And I think right now, running it through the model, if we played that game right now, the model would have Miami minus 3 3/4 points, -4, somewhere around there. So it would be a very tight line, but we would have Miami favored. Next up, let's go to the Big Ten. This is where I think the least amount has changed. In the preseason, it was Ohio State, Oregon favored. In the preseason, it was Ohio State over Oregon as my prediction. And really the only big change is USC has looked a lot better than folks thought they would. Penn State's still a total wild card here. They go to Southern Cal in a couple of weeks. They host Ohio State a couple of more weeks down the road. If they split those, they could be in the conference title game. But outside of that, I've got no reason to come off of anything here. I'm taking Ohio State against Oregon in the conference title game. They play each other next week in Eugene, by the way. So we don't have to wait until then. Round 1, maybe, is next week in the Pacific Northwest. Round 2, theoretically, would be in Indianapolis in December. So give me Ohio State over Oregon as the same prediction. Haven't changed anything there. So to recap, I'm taking Texas over Alabama as my SEC pick right now. Ohio State over Oregon as my Big Ten pick. Those have not changed. I got Iowa State over Utah in the Big 12. That has changed. And Miami, same ACC champ, but I've got them taking it over Clemson instead of Florida State. Somehow, some way, I don't think Florida State's finding a way in. Pause there. I'm using my one timeout that we have per show. And I am here to remind you, we're headed out on the road in just a few short hours now. And we are headed with the entire Whole New Saturday Tour crew to College Station this weekend. We are going to see Missouri versus A&M. It's my favorite kind of game. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff. Get back to Nashville Saturday night. Love it, love it, love it. And Quick Trip has us fueled all the way there, all the way back. We appreciate them. We've been giving out gas cards left and right. They have been a very willing partner that plays ball the way that we like to do it on this show. And so we're looking very, very much forward to that one. And they have had fun with us all year, man. It's a really, really powerful feeling when at any given time, when someone says something you like, you just get to, like, frisbee a free gas card at their face. It's dangerous, but then again, we're a dangerous show. All right, before we get Cubelic in here, let's do something. So, Jesse, I'm going to call an audible. This is just a little production meeting. Don't pay attention to this. Here's what I think we should do. Cubelic's probably watching somewhere. The Urban and Kirby thing, I think we should just do that when Cubelic is on the air with us. So we'll still do it. And I also need you to tell me, Colin, can we play that Urban Meyer SOT while we have Cubelic live? Yes, okay, no big deal. All right, we'll do that in a few minutes. Anyway, I think we need a drum roll. This is a big moment because I can't promise that I'll change my predictions again after this, although I do reserve the right to. I am ready to change my college football playoff predictions. Many people have done it before and been accused of all sorts of things. I am just the latest. Let me remind you where I was in the preseason. This is where I was. And if you're listening on podcast, we had 2 rematches of conference championship games in the Final Four. We had Ohio State, Oregon, and we had Texas, Alabama, and we had Ohio State over Texas in the national title game. So the devil is a lot more in the details of 5 through 12, basically, like which other teams did we have in. So it was, in the preseason, it was Ohio State, Texas, Miami, and Oklahoma. That was my 1 through 4. Those were my conference champs, basically. And therefore, those were the teams that were going to get a bye. I have some changes that I would like to make right here before God and you and everyone else. I would like to change my number 1 seed to Texas. Texas wins the SEC and is my number 1 seed. Ohio State wins the Big Ten. They are my number 2 seed. I've got Miami winning the ACC just as I did. I've got them with the number 3 seed just as I did. Iowa State, welcome to the party. You might as well call it now. Iowa State, the Big 12 champ. Whatever you think about auto bids, they suck. But whatever you think about them, that's the rules. And so Iowa State's number 4. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, the real fun begins in number 5, 6, 7, and 8. I still hold the theory, I still hold the opinion that the committee is going to heavily favor teams that made their conference title game. So if Bama's losing the SEC title game, I think they drop no further than 5th. Oregon loses the Big Ten title game. I think they drop no further than 6th. Penn State is going to be a strong candidate to have one of these top seeds. And I think that there will be number 7. Tennessee's right there at number 8. I could flip those in any order. There's, to me, frankly, not a lot of skill in predicting how that goes. Now, even more fun than that is who are the last 4 here. Number 9, I've got Georgia in the playoff. I just think they're a 2-loss team, a 2-loss at-large from the SEC. That's what I think we're looking at right now if I had to project it in Georgia. Clemson, if their resume has a loss to Georgia and their other loss is, let's say, the ACC title game to Miami, that's an 11-2 resume. It's really solid. I think they'll be good enough to lock down a 10 seed. I put USC at 11. Now, let me tell you, I think LSU is going to make a little run here. I think LSU is going to factor somehow into the bubble of the playoff conversation. But I think it may come down to people comparing resumes, USC, LSU, and there is a head-to-head result that you'd have to honor there. So, believe it or not, I was close to putting LSU in there. I think there's still some gas in the tank for that team. And so I don't have Notre Dame in the playoff. I don't have Ole Miss in the playoff. I think LSU, USC, those kinds of teams could be in the conversation. I got LSU 11. I've got the Fighting Barry Odoms out there. UNLV is currently my G5 team that I would put in the playoff now over Memphis. The Aaron Grisham special there, as we like to call it. Okay, now that we've got our seeds 1 through 12, how do I think this is playing out? I'm actually not nervous at all. I'm just pretending. Because the bracket is fixed, because we don't reseed, let me tell you what this means. We got a 5 through 12 here. 5 versus 12 is Alabama versus UNLV. All due respect to the Rebs, I don't love their chances going into Tuscaloosa in December. I just don't. USC versus Oregon, USC at Oregon. I would take Oregon to win that game. Clemson at Penn State is really fun. I would take Penn State, a rested Penn State at home in mid-December to win that game. And I would actually, they're not rested, are they? They're still, though. They are kind of rested because Penn State didn't play in the conference title game and Clemson did. So they kind of are rested. I take Penn State there. And Georgia at Tennessee. So basically a return trip in the same year because they play in Athens in a couple of weeks. I would take Tennessee in that matchup, I think, right now to win that game. So all the home teams win there, which advances them to the next round. Remember, friends, the bracket is set, so we don't reseed. Texas would play Tennessee. We think that would be in the Sugar Bowl. I would take Texas over Tennessee. We would have Ohio State versus Penn State. We think that that one would be in the Rose Bowl because of the historical tie-in. I'd take Ohio State to win that one. That would be Penn State's second trip to L.A. this year, by the way. We have got Miami versus Oregon. I don't need to tell fans of either program, nor do I need to tell the staffs of either program, nor do I need to tell the SID departments of either program what the lead storyline in this matchup would be. Miami versus Oregon. Think head coaches. We think that one would be in the Peach Bowl. Slight lean Miami right now. Very slight lean. Like really slight lean. And then Iowa State would play Alabama in what we think would be the Fiesta Bowl, so out in Arizona. And I take Bama. Bama will have, just if you're keeping track at home, As the 5 seed, Bama will have drawn UNLV and Iowa State so far. But there are people out there who will tell you, slam dunk, no question, they'd rather have the role of Texas. They'd rather have the role of Ohio State. Okay. I think case by case, we may disagree on that, i.e. this case. Let's go. Final 4. We have got Texas versus Alabama, an SEC championship game rematch. We have got Ohio State, Miami. They don't play in the regular season. Now, let me tell you what the big controversy here would be. These semifinal games are in Arlington, Texas, and Miami, Florida. Preference is given to the top overall seed. So Texas essentially kind of gets to pick where they play. Texas is not choosing to go to South Florida when they can play in their backyard there in Dallas. So Texas would play Bama in Dallas, and I need you to understand that that means even though Ohio State is the number 2 overall seed, they would be forced to go to Miami, Florida, to play Miami in a semifinal game. Does it seem right? Does it make sense? Of course it does not. But in this unique circumstance, that's the way it would work. I would take, nevertheless, Texas to beat Bama. I would take Ohio State to beat Miami, and it would give me the exact same championship game that I already had, and I'm going to take my exact same champion. I am going to take in the national title game, slightly, Ohio State over Texas. Model would make that Ohio State minus 1.5 right now. Model's very high on Ohio State. You can disagree with that. That's okay. We got a long way to go. But we got Ohio State over Texas still in the national championship game right now. I don't see how any of it goes wrong. I honestly don't. They're watching us in St. George, Louisiana, Maryville, Tennessee, and Burbank, California. Before we get Cubelic in here, let me remind you, all the odds on this show are brought to you courtesy of FanDuel. FanDuel, the exclusive odds provider. FanDuel bringing you Friday night lines tomorrow night from a hotel room in College Station, Texas. And we're going to have a lot of fun with that because we're going to win with that. And speak of the devil, I've already got 3 plays on the Ramen Noodle Express. We're adding 2 of them. So we got Wake Forest plus 5.5. We got Virginia Pick'em. We got East Carolina minus 8.5. Those are the 3 that we added earlier this week. We added Florida State plus 14.5. Brave little toaster mode there. And I'm adding Florida plus 2.5. Coming off a bye there in the swamp. I counted on UCF last week, and they disappointed me in crushing fashion. This is not personal, though. We don't try and tail emotion on this. I just think the wrong team's favored in the game. So I'm taking Florida plus 2.5, like them to win outright, and I'm taking Florida State plus 14.5. Don't quite like them to win outright, but we do think it's a couple too many points. All right, let's get Cubelic in here. He will be in Nashville, I think, in like a few hours. When are you coming up here? You got Vandy Bama Saturday. Why aren't you already here?
Well, I went to Bama practice in Tuscaloosa today, so just got back to Birmingham a few minutes ago, scooped up the kids at school, and I don't know. It's either going to be later tonight after I help get the kids to bed, or we'll do the show here in the morning and then drive up. It's game time decision here. It's basically a quarterback with a little bit of a hip flexor, and we're not sure if we're going to go or not.
What did you think of what you saw at Bama practice? Well, you know what? Why not? What have you thought about what you've seen from them so far before we dive into this Auburn-Georgia game?
I like how they've grown through the course of the season. The identity of the offense seems to be becoming a little bit more clear. If you go to the second half of that Georgia game, I know a lot of people think of, well, it was a meltdown and didn't like the play calling. It was conservative. If you really dive into it, Josh, which I know you do, because those folks who watch the film, no one can really argue with them. It was just execution. There was a couple different reads. It was a couple different receivers maybe broke a route off early, a receiver that didn't finish their route to maybe run off another defender. So those are things that are easily repaired. I think a couple of the guys up front like LT Overton are exceeding expectations. If Quay Russaw gets back, gets healthier, we saw him cause the fumble in that game. I think he can be a big-time edge defender. Were some things in the secondary that have to be cleaned up, but I like how this team has upward momentum trending here to the first half of the season.
Okay.
And by the way, the offensive line, I think this year is about what you and I thought it would be last year.
Yeah, we're just ahead of the curve. We used to do it with TCU all the time. Be 1 year ahead on TCU. All right. I know you guys have probably talked about this game a little bit down in Birmingham on radio, but Colin, here's a good endpoint for you. Auburn's playing Georgia this Saturday. They tell me it's the Deep South's oldest rivalry. They tell me you played in this game. once upon a time. But they also tell me Georgia's a 24.5-point favorite. Saturday, 3:30 game there on ABC, at least in the Eastern time zone. So let me just ask you, let me just float something to you. Everyone knows turnovers have been a chronic issue with Auburn. They were a problem last week for Georgia, mind you, but they've been a chronic problem all year for Auburn. So let's just say that we rub the magic 8 ball. Turnovers are even in this game. No edge either way. Number one, miracle. And then number two, Peyton Thorne, 300-plus yard guy, 2 of his last 4 games. Auburn otherwise, their offensive profile is a top 25 yards per game, pass yards per game, explosive plays per game team. Georgia has had slow start after slow start this year. And as much as folks are looking for a big-time get-up-off-the-mat response from Georgia from last week, I should reasonably expect that from Georgia or from Auburn as well. They have been terrible in Sanford Stadium. I understand that. They are not as good a team, nowhere close to as good a team as Georgia is. The quality depth is not there. They may not be able to get after the quarterback quite like Alabama did. But, man, this is 24.5 points. Are you ready to at least present to me the idea, because you called Kentucky nearly outright last week, are you ready to present the idea that you could see a fourth quarter game here?
After that diatribe of Auburn negativity, I'm not sure how anybody could. But I guess that I'll go out on a limb and try to give you a couple reasons that I think they may be able to. One, outside of one deep ball down the sideline, Auburn's been pretty good in man coverage this year. It's one of the bigger surprises that I've seen with this team. That could allow them to have extra defenders close to the box to play the run, which I also don't think Georgia has really overly committed to this season. Is this going to be the game where they say, we think we can push this group around, let's attach our tight ends, let's try to go north and south and see what they can do about it, and then maybe try to let Carson Beck work off play action? Or you're able to dedicate more bodies to more stunts, more pressures, more simulated pressures, which I do think DJ Durkin's done a pretty good job of drawing some things up to be able to confuse some different quarterbacks this season. So it really is the same story on both sides. You have some strengths that need to go a little bit further to protecting your weaknesses. So can Jarquez Hunter be able to get the run game going? Is the offensive line going to continue a little bit of an upward trend? I thought they had one of their better games last week, even though it's not great. I mean, I'm not saying that they're running people over left and right, but they have shown some improvement, got a little bit more from the tight ends in the run game last week. I think you'll see more misdirection. I think there's some things that I don't want to say they've been held, but that Hugh Freeze will probably pull out for this game that we haven't seen a lot of so far this season. Could they keep it competitive if a lot of those things go their way? Number one, I think you got to get pressure on Carson Beck. I think you have to make him uncomfortable like he was in the Kentucky game and the first half of the Alabama game, which means your corners are going to be on an island. And they've been pretty decent there. So running the football also going to be paramount. And against this front, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So we'll see. Peyton Thorne probably has to do a lot with his legs if that were to take place. I think you'll see him break that defense down multiple times if Auburn is sustaining drives. I think they slow it down too. I don't think this is a tempo game. I don't think this is one where you try to go fast and see if you can get 80 plays or try and throw the football down the field constantly. Make sure you're getting into the right play. Make sure you're getting into the right thing. Probably hurry to the line of scrimmage, and then maybe some look over, some check with me's, just to kind of be certain that what you see is what the coaches see and try to avoid catastrophes like Auburn has seen in almost every other game.
I also have no reason to expect a fast start from Georgia. They could spring one on you anytime, but I'm going to go with what my eyes have seen so far this year. I think if that is a like one possession game at half, the juice in that locker room to come out the second half will be enough to keep this compressed, because you talked about sort of dialing down tempo a little bit. I would echo that. And so I think somehow, some way, this is well within 24.5. So I go Georgia win, Auburn cover. Do you agree or disagree on that?
No, I'm going to say no cover here.
You're going to say no cover. So blowout city.
Yeah.
All right. Fun calls on Monday morning. We have talked a lot. You and I have talked about Alabama, Georgia. We've talked about Tennessee a fair amount. We've talked about Ole Miss. Like, we've talked about a lot of the top teams. Texas, because basically the top 5 or so right now is a bunch of SEC teams, and then it's Ohio State in there. And Ohio State is the quintessential who have they played team right now. I get it yelled in my face every day just like you do. So it's like Usain Bolt shows up to a 5th grade field day, dominates all the little elementary school sprinters, and someone yells, well, he didn't prove anything. He's probably not even fast. Like, who did he race? Well, it is true that he didn't race anyone of note, but he's still a world-class sprinter. Ohio State could be that. They could be a dominant team that just hadn't really had to prove that yet this year. And they may not have to do it this Saturday against Iowa, but if they don't, they'll go to Eugene and they'll do it one way or the other next week. So I know you've watched them a little bit. What have you thought about them relative to what you expected to see?
Yeah, I watch him every week, mainly just to wait and see when Seth McLaughlin's going to have all the bad snaps that everybody predicted that he would have,
Right.
and he hasn't had a single one yet. But I do think Will Howard's getting more comfortable. This Chip Kelly offense is one that's going to take some time. He has so many different things. There are so many different options as to how he can block things, different players that you can read on individual plays, and the things that the quarterback's going to have to notice, see, get in, get out of to be able to run at full speed. Now, he doesn't have to be all the way there week 1, 2, or 3, but I have noticed a gradual ascent in this offense. I think the comfort level at quarterback has gotten better and better. We know the talent that they have at running back, whether it's Judkins or Travion Henderson, they've been fantastic. I do think the offensive line is playing a little bit ahead of where I thought they would. I mean, listen, what else can you say about Jeremiah Smith and how ridiculous he's been at wide receiver? I love G. Scott at tight end. Now, I'm not ready to say that he's caged over from a year ago, but he's adding a little extra oomph to that offensive line and making them a little bit more physical. And if the quarterback continues to become more comfortable with different reads, manipulating different things through the mesh point, they're going to be tough to stop. And I feel like I've seen more being added, and I feel like I've seen more comfort being able to run this offense this way. I'm still not going to say the defense is elite, and I know your listeners aren't going to like that because they didn't like it when I said it last time, but I don't know if it has to be elite. And I'm not really sure I care who they played, because what I watch or what I see when I watch them is a team that keeps growing and a team that can put their roster from a talent perspective up against anybody else in college football. So I actually really like Ohio State right now. Not down on them at all, regardless of what the level of competition's been.
All right, now I'm going to get ahead of the comments because they will think you're down on them. You are basically, you're suggesting that it's not 11 superheroes on defense. You're suggesting that they are mere human 18 to 22-year-old college football players. There are strengths and weaknesses, more strengths than weaknesses, but everyone didn't magically elevate 50% in their level of play just because they came back. So break down, if you were to just put potato sacks on them instead of Ohio State jerseys, so we remove all the helmet bias, what do you actually see from them defensively?
I do think you have a good defensive tackle rotation. I think the first two better than the second two. I think you have capable edge defenders. The problem is they disappear at times. They go away at times. It's not as consistent as you would like it to see. When it's good, it's really good. Linebacker, sideline to sideline speed. Josh, I don't know if I can speak to the secondary. I don't know how much it's been tested yet. I don't really know. And as you stated, we're probably not going to see that again this week. And I would love to see some of those interior defensive linemen and some of those edge defenders against better offensive lines and more capable offenses. But I see enough to know that they're not going to give up 45 on an annual basis or a weekly basis, and they're not going to give up a bunch of explosive plays just because they do have the ability to attack their quarterback with 4. They're going to be able to get there some. And I think they have talent on the back end. I just don't know if they've been tested enough for me to really say I'm putting them up there with any other defense in college football yet.
All right, I'm going to College Station tonight. We'll be there Saturday for Missouri versus Texas A&M. Now, I have not heard anyone else's prediction on this game. Blindly, I was under the assumption that a lot of people would see that Missouri is a top 10 team and they would pick them to win the game. Then I was informed earlier today that's not the case. The entire world is on A&M, as am I. Now, it seems like the entire world was on Bama last week, and Bama ends up winning. So it can happen. But have you gotten this sense? Because you could, if I find out the world is on A&M, I'm not sold on this totally. I could easily invert this thing, and we could just do a Missouri dominant preview and both pick them here. I'm not against it. Quarterback edge there, wide receiver edge there. Coaching staff edge is probably there, at least in terms of continuity. It's fun to see, by the way, how many first-year staffs Missouri faces this year. So how are you seeing this game?
I think it's interesting because I, like you, am beginning to hear more and more people just say this is A&M's game, and it's not going to be competitive. They like A&M, and that's just kind of it. Everybody on the morning show is riding with A&M. McElroy, our entire staff, they're all rolling with A&M. Have no question about it. I think this is a little bit of what we've dealt with a couple of teams this year that have had a bad showing against an inferior opponent, and all of a sudden we just label them bad football team. If you would just kind of pay closer attention to how Vanderbilt played Missouri, and actually had an interesting conversation with another head coach in the league about this today because he thinks his team might be played that way this week. They give up everything underneath and basically said, we don't think you want to drive 8, 10, 12, 15 plays for all your scores. They think you're going to get greedy before they do. And it was a good strategy, but Brady Cook ran the offense the way that he should have when presented with a defense like that. I think Nate Noel is pure art running the stretch play. Love Brett Norfleet at tight end, the physicality he brings. I think Armand Mimbu is the best right tackle in college football. And Brady Cook has not had to be great yet for them to win a game. Do I think he will at some point this year? Yes. If we're talking about going deep into the college football playoff or just getting to the playoff, he's going to have a 420-yard game, 380-yard game, which puts another 80, 100 on the ground, like put the team on his back, so to speak. But I love the backs, Noel and Carroll. We know what Luther Burden's capable of. Theo East and Mookie Cooper offset that with a good group of tight ends and an offensive line that's got a great feel for the stretch play that they build everything off of. And I still think the defense is pretty aggressive. It might not be last year's group, but you got a safety that'll come down and try to decleat you on every snap. Linebackers active, 2 edge defenders and an interior defender that are playing pretty good football right now. So I just don't know what the problem is with Missouri. Is it they haven't scored enough points? Like they're not blowing people out? I just don't judge teams that way. And there's a lot to like about A&M. Don't get me wrong. That defensive line is insane. Love Shamar Turner. Shamar Stewart's playing good football this year. I thought Nick Scorton would be good, but I honestly, Josh, didn't think he'd be this good. Yeah. He's flat out dominant, and he's bigger and more physical than I imagined he would be in this league. The tight end, Theo Malin Osterholm, I'm probably butchering that. I think he brings a little extra physicality to the offensive line. They still have an issue at left tackle, but the O-line's coming along. We know they can run the football some. But I think you have a quarterback that's still young you're trying to figure out. And that if you can present different things to him defensively, can probably get him into a couple mistakes. And the accuracy has dipped a little bit as opposed to taking off. So I like Missouri a lot coming into the season. I think they can offset that offensive line with everything that Kirby Moore does to be able to give you window dressing, eye violations. He's going to run split zone. He's going to have jet sweeps coming back and forth. They're going to run the stretch play with boots off of it. They're going to screen off everything. Like they're going to get that group running. And I think they can wear that defensive line down. And if you can remove or negate the strength of another football team, and it's that much of a strength, I think you got a pretty good chance to win. So that's why I'll take Missouri this weekend.
You know where it could turn as ugly as quickly as anywhere this side of like Tallahassee, and that's Ole Miss. Ole Miss going on the road after that loss against Kentucky. You know what the preseason expectation was. You know what the standard for this year was. I don't even think it was unfair. I think them expecting that was to be expected. If they've got a second loss hung on them before they really get into the what is the meat of their schedule, it's different there. To me, it's different there. Like if Georgia was to lose another game and they get knocked out of whatever contention they're in, Georgia's just we'll get them next year. Bama, Ohio State is a we'll get them next year program. The folks at Ole Miss had not built this year like that. They don't have that mentality. They look in the future and it's like the edge of a cliff. Whatever happens beyond this, this is the year. I say that because that means if things go sideways and it's early October, I think it could be a little more uncomfortable over there than just your typical, a hard-fought conference loss on the road. And I say that to say I don't believe in the phrase do or die very often. I think it's pretty close to that for Ole Miss because I don't think they have the kind of schedule that they could pad enough to build a resume to be a playoff contender if they've got those 2 losses already on there.
Interesting. Don't believe in do or die. Do you believe in ride or die?
Absolutely. Why do you think I have you on the show?
I'm just asking. A couple things with Ole Miss. I think what you're trying to say here is we all have a little bit of that inherent fear that there's going to be this checkout rate if they lose another game.
Yep.
And I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair. We've all questioned how is this going to work, the chemistry, the continuity. When I was there a couple of weeks ago, people inside the building swore it was different, presented us with reasons that it was different, and I believed them. Jackson Dart being one of those. You have the number 1 rush defense in college football. Let's not forget that. I understand the level of competition, but they are better suited to be a team that can defend Lenore Sellers if he's going in this offense and if Rocket Sanders is going, and if they find a way to have it close to being full speed, they have the bodies to be able to do that. Now, what you flip around to the other side, South Carolina has the bodies to be able to do is attack the quarterback, similar to the fashion in which I was attacked on your show 2 weeks ago for saying that the Ole Miss offensive line had not been playing great football this year. And now for multiple weeks in a row, we've proven that that has been correct. I think they're becoming a little bit one-dimensional, a little bit too drop-back heavy, in my opinion. There is a legitimate run game and running back to be able to be leaned on with multiple tight ends that can now help you with that, and a quick game that can offset that a little bit. I told you after week 2, I thought Jackson Dart was taking too many hits. Wake Forest game, he was taking too many hits. They've got to find a way to offset him with elongated drops in the pocket. The receivers are super talented. You don't think Juice Wells wants to go catch 15 for 300 in this game? I know he does. I know his demeanor and his attitude. But you also have a secondary behind a defensive line that can absolutely wreck you, that is veteran-laced with guys that have been around, that understand how to work coverage, show different coverages, disguise things, and be able to find the football. So it's a really interesting matchup because I do think that there's one side of the football that favors both of these teams and maybe not so much the other. I think Lane knows where he is, though, and I think he knows the potential of dropping this one, and you'll see some of those things that we have concerns about show back up. Lean on the run game a little bit, not ask as much of your quarterback in the pocket for as long of a period of time. I think Ole Miss finds a way to bounce back. Some of this is my health concerns with Carolina, just overall, because if I knew they were all healthy, I might feel a little bit different about this game, and if it was at 6:30 instead of, 3:15, I'd probably feel really different about it.
All right, enjoy Nashville. If you need any recs, let me know. You've only been here 50 times in your life, so you're still learning your way around. Happy travels, and I will talk to you when I talk to you, okay?
You have happy travels as well. Tell Lucci and company I said hello.
Will do. Cube Show on YouTube, people. Cube Show. Look it up. Love it. Ingest it. It's pretty good stuff. That guy with his YouTube show. It's pretty good stuff. Cole Cube.
Didn't get to 15,000, by the way, last week. So the Pate effect is...
It's not me. It's just the audience. Yeah, I subscribed. It's just the audience that hasn't done it yet. Okay. Yeah. Cube Show, people. One of us. Cube Show. Go help him out. All right. We got to get out of here. We got to go catch a flight. For producer Jesse, for director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Enjoy the weekend of games. Don't get caught sleeping. And we'll see you Sunday night to react to it all. God bless.